Operations Division. So I think you will be with these expertise, you will have much more from him to hear on this situation, and particularly the cyber war which has been raised by Pakistan in relation to Kashmir. I think we have a lot to look at that cyber war point of view also in that. Uh, he has held very important commanding positions and different capacities, and he was also the chairman of the executive committee of think tank organizations such as United Services Institute, New Delhi, and Center for Joint Welfare Studies in New Delhi. And we really look forward to be enlightened by his views on the current situations, and particularly keeping in view the historical background of 1947. Then we have Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh. I hope you see General every day on debates, not one but on many channels, and giving his expert. Yeah. No, I'm just giving the introductions right in the beginning so that we don't spend the time later on. That's why I mentioned that. And uh, um, he superannuated as Deputy Chief of Army Staff, and you can understand the importance of this position. And after nearly 40 years of service, he has distinctively held two PSO appointments in, that is Adjutant General and Deputy COAS at present. At present, he is a distinguished fellow with Center for Land Warfare Center and Adjutant Fellow with Institute of Chinese Studies. He is invited on TV and seminar discussions, as I said. He also learned Chinese, and he also learned Persian in his career, which we were discussing yesterday over that. And he has the board comprising education, prosecution, and court proceedings, and is a member of discipline committee in IBBI. She's also looking after limited insolvency examination and many other aspects related to that. So friends, I won't stand in between, and I'll request our our great General, Lieutenant General Saeed Atta Haslan, to speak on, and he's speaking on battles for the destiny of J&K. Welcome, sir. All over to you, sir.
Thank you, the chair. If you can hear me, kindly just put up your hand, please. If you can hear me, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My apologies. Firstly, Jai Hind to everyone. My apologies that I'm not there in person with you. My duties at the National Disaster Management Authority in the times of COVID-19 prevent me from traveling out at the moment. But let me start by complimenting the Ministry of Culture, because I think this is an outstanding decision taken, something by which I, as someone who has served extensively in Kashmir, would have always wanted an event which had a positive linkage to India. Unfortunately, for many years we have been celebrating, marking Yom Shoda on 27th of October. We have been also marking Accession Day on 26th of October. We've been marking Infantry Day of the Indian Army on the 27th of October. None of these events had a transformational backing of the government of Jammu and Kashmir. neither was an effort made to try and change narratives which had been established. The narratives of the Pakistani side on the other side of the line of control always seem to be preeminent, as if the Black Day was 26th of October, when actually the accession took place to India, or the Black Day was 27th of October, when the Indian Army landed in Srinagar. Now, how am I qualified to speak about all this, and how am I qualified to say that this is a great day? For one, anyone who has commanded troops in the small township of Uri, next on the border, which has got such a historic connection to this entire day, 22nd October onwards, and anyone who has commanded troops at Baramulla itself will always remember and take ownership of these two townships and become almost an integrated part of them, because that's where history was really played out. I don't even claim my appointment as the GOC 15 Corps in any way in this particular. The 26th of October. What was clear was that the Pakistani side perceived that things are not going to be moving in their direction, towards their direction in the near future. So preparations had not started not from August, preparations had started from as early as July. It was also clear that the division of the Indian Army was taking place. There would not be enough assets in the hands of the Pakistani establishment. There would not be enough, perhaps, in terms of these organized units of the Srinagar. And so therefore all attempts were made to coerce the Maharaja through all these raids on the border townships and things like putting these blockades, etc. But the Maharaja did not. Under their control. They also knew what the state of discipline of the tribals was. The tribals were promised the freedom to loot and plunder, the freedom to carry out whatever activities they wanted and take away, as long as that land, the Jammu and Kashmir territories, came under their control. And this is what some people today in Jammu and Kashmir say, that India is interested in the land of Jammu and Kashmir. No, India has always been interested in the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Here was a country, Pakistan, newly created, which was only yearning, not for anything else. It was only yearning for the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. To give it that added advantage, to give it a strategic advantage, it could be least concerned about the people of Jammu and Kashmir, as will be very evident from the events that I will speak about. What was very clear was that right in 1947, Pakistan chose not to fight India through the conventional. Today we use the term hybrid war very, very frequently. I am one of those who keeps advocating it all the time. In fact, Pakistan chose to fight India in the 1,000 men, 1,000 men as a part of a Lashkar, one major, one captain, and 10 JCOs of the Pakistan Army were the command element for each Lashkar. The Pakistan Army provided them weapons, ammunition, communications, transport, some amount of transport, medical supply, and support. Everyone thinks that these Lashkars were extremely brave men. The reputation of the tribal, the persons who could fight the British and things like that. As events unfolded later, it was realized that the biggest cowards of the world were actually these tribals. All that they came to Jammu and Kashmir war for was loot, plunder, and rape of women. The number of women who were carried away from here, from Uri and Srinagar and Baramulla, it actually confirms what the actual intent of the Kabalis or the tribals was. So Pakistan put its plan in action on 22nd of October 47, considering the onset of winter and considering what it felt was the effectiveness of its operations that it had undertaken till at that moment and how much period was left for the winter to come. So the plan broadly was six Lashkars were to advance along the Muzaffarabad, Domain, Uri, Baramulla route. Subsequently, they were to go and block the Banihal Pass, which is where the Jawahar Tunnel is. Two Lashkars were to advance from Hajipir to Gulmarg to secure the southern flank of this offensive. Two Lashkars were to advance from Titwal in the Kishanganga, Ilam Valley area, to Titwal, Nastachun, get to Sopor, Handwara, and Baldi. That's the North Kashmir area. 10 Lashkars were to capture Poonch and Rajouri and then advance towards Jammu. And Pakistan's 7th Infantry Division was to concentrate in the area of Mari Abbottabad, which is north of Rawalpindi, ready to exploit any of the tribal gains. Which means that if the tribals had succeeded in capturing Srinagar, that this 7th Infantry Division was the one which would have been pushed along the Muzaffarabad-Uri axis to exploit those gains. Mercifully, nothing happened. The operations were such that the plunder of Muzaffarabad and Domain took place. There was a mutiny within Fort Jackrif, one of the state force units. It was a communal program instigated over a period of time, which led to a division within the state forces. From then onwards, the Lashkars marched towards Uri, Baramulla, and Srinagar with this intent. Few ramshackle vehicles and things like that were put together, and they moved as some kind of subunits and units on the Uri, Muzaffarabad or Muzaffarabad-Uri route. For those who have served in this area, for those who know Kashmir well, those who know Uri well, on a very famous bridge called the Nand Singh Bridge on the way to Uri. Nand Singh Bridge the name was given much later, named on a very, very famous Subadar of the first Sikh, who was a Victoria Cross and got a Mahavir Chakra later on there. This particular bridge on the tongue, on the Uri Nala, which is also known as the Hyderabad Nala, this bridge was destroyed by the state forces of Brigadier Rajinder. Brigadier Rajinder Singh, seeing the situation as it was, had been fighting it out on the border for the last almost 3 months. His troops were in a state of disarray. All he could get was 2 companies to try and prevent the move of the Lashkars into Baramulla. And they destroyed this particular bridge at the Hyderabad. The Lashkars refused to move forward. They wanted vehicles to be given to them so that they could move to Baramulla. That was their state. Their passion to fight was not there at all. Subsequently, when a few vehicles were provided and they were persuaded, they managed to reach Baramulla only on the 26th of October. Now, in between, a lot of events had taken place in India. The Maharaja of Kashmir Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir had been convinced that if he signs the instrument of accession, the Indian army would come in and rush to his assistance. He finally signed it on the 26th of October. And that opened up the floodgates for the Indian army. Now, the army could come by 2 means. One was either to come by the Uri-Muzaffarabad road, which was already in the hands of the Lashkars, the tribals, The second by road was to come by Kathua Jammu road, which had been anticipated by the Pakistanis. And they had actually placed Lashkars there to prevent the movement of the Indian Army by surface means. They also knew about the possibility of landing by air. And they had hoped that they would be able to reach the Srinagar airfield before that. Somehow destiny played in India's hands. And that's exactly what happened. Because as the Lashkars moved to Baramulla, they got involved completely in Baramula's pillage, the pillage of Uri, then the pillage and plunder of Baramulla. In Baramulla, it says, those who know Baramulla very well, no religion, no faith. Everyone was a common enemy for them. A wonderful article which I came across only a day before, written by Asha Khosa, a very fine writer from Kashmir, speaks about the heroics of this young man called Maqbool Sharwani. Now, whatever one says about Maqbool Sharwani is too small in any such event. In fact, there should be a day dedicated to Maqbool Sharwani. Maqbool Sharwani's heroism is linked to the fact that actually he was in Sumbal that day on 26th of October. When he heard about the movement of the Lashkars into Baramulla, he came back to Baramulla, sent his family out, and thereafter started attempting to befriend the Lashkars, the Kabalis. And in the course of that, he tried to divert their attention. He tried to mislead them by telling them that the Indian army had already landed and they were on the way towards Baramulla. They were somewhere near Patan. He advised them not to move forward to fight them, but to fight them at Baramulla itself, which he claimed was a more defensible ground. All this produced a sense of confusion in the minds of the leadership of the Kabalis. And they stayed put at Baramulla. They didn't move to Srinagar. And on the 27th of October, 8:30 in the morning, the first flights of first Sikh landed in Srinagar, at the Srinagar airfield. That was the destiny. That was what changed the destiny of the situation. If there had been a delay of even perhaps a day, even if there had been a delay of perhaps a few hours, it would have led to the Indian Army's inability to land on contested landing at the Srinagar airfield. Maqbool Sharwani's ability to hold back the Kabalis, mislead them in Baramulla, actually contributed hugely to this change of destiny. Later, Maqbool Sharwani was discovered. His actual identity came to be known. He was hunted down. He was killed with 14 bullets. 14 bullets pumped into his body. His body was strung up on a pole. But before stringing up on a pole, he was crucified. I hope people understand the meaning of crucified. He was crucified. He was actually nailed to a cross. Sticks and big nails were driven into his ankles, into his palms, and he was hung in that manner for people to see. His body was finally taken down by his sister, later buried. Today we celebrate, Indian Army has been celebrating Maqbool Sharwani for years and years. Okay, may I continue?
Sir, please continue. I request you to wind it up in 5 minutes' time.
I'm fired up in 5 minutes' time. I think you should take a rest for yourself. You will go out and take a little rest to stabilize
No, it's fine. It's fine. You please wrap up in 5 minutes. I will.
Maqbool Sharwani, in the year 2003, the army constructed a community hall in his honor. We constructed a memorial in his honor. I came back in 2008 as the GEOS 19th Infantry Division, and we made sure that we always utilized this, having dedicated it to the people of Baramulla. Attempts made later on to desecrate the memory of Maqbool when peace came up after 1989. And this is what I want people to go home with, that lesson. that it is important to remember how efforts were made to change the perceptions of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. How from across the border propaganda was used and today continues to be used on social media to try and show that the actual heroes of Jammu and Kashmir, people like Mahmood Sharwani, were actually villains. They were painted as villains in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. Having said that, let me come back very briefly to this last bit of a few other battles. It's very important to remember that after 27th of October, it took 7 days for the major battles to take place. In between, the CO of First Lieutenant Colonel Devanchand Rai was killed. Mahavir Chakra, he earned a Mahavir Chakra near Patan. An attempt was, after all, made, a tactical effort was made to draw in the Kapalis to Srinagar. They were drawn into Srinagar, and finally large number of them were neutralized and eliminated in the Battle of Sheladang. Who will remind anyone about Sheladang? Sheladang was the battle in which the first Paramveer Chakra of India was won by Major Somnath Shah, Fort Kumar. And his memorial is there right outside the Srinagar airport. I hope people go. Every time I went past that memorial, I always saluted that memorial. I hope today people continue to salute the memorial of India's first Paramveer Chakra. The pushback by the Indian Army thereafter started. 7th of November, Baramulla was recaptured. 13th of November, Uri was recaptured. And I need to remind people that we went to Hajipir, we went and captured Pandu, which is across the current command post on the other side of the command post. We went into the Pir Panjal and captured the Pir Kanti, a very famous high feature called Pir Kanti. We captured the Ledwali Gali. We captured Redi Gali. Unfortunately, because of the state of winter preparations at that time, we had to pull out of Hajipir. That's the first we pulled out of Hajipir. We pulled out the second time in 1965. Again, we had to pull out of Pir Kanti and pull out of Ledwali. We had to pull out of that piece of ground. The last bit, of course, a final counter was carried out along the Handwara axis by 163 Brigade under the leadership of the great Brigadier, later Lieutenant General Harbakh Singh. The famous battles of Handwara, Trehgam, Nastachun, and Tithwal were fought. And each of these battles was greater than the other. And the restoration of the status of the Maharaja's control or India's control over the territories of Jammu and Kashmir was established. We had heroics in the south of the Pir Panjal. We had Brigadier Muhammad Usman in the Battle of Naushera. Who can forget the heroics of Brigadier Pritam Singh in the Battle of Poonch? It's a sacrilege today that I, as a company commander, used to sit in Poonch and look across the line of control and see that the post on the other side of the line of control was called Pritam. I hope one day that Pritam post will come back to us and we will be able to salute the memory of Brigadier Pritam Singh. So finally, I could recount many more battles, but I think one last battle which needs to be spoken about is the Battle of Zojila, which today people are saying that tanks for the first time have gone into 17,000 feet to fight the battles. I can assure you tanks of the Indian Army, the 7th Cavalry, fought at 11,000 to 12,000 feet. Actually, they were dismantled, put into vehicles, carriers, and taken on top and assembled together. A tank battle took place for the control of one of the most important landmarks for Jammu and Kashmir. That is the Zojila, through which the Zojila tunnel is now about to be constructed. This gives you access into Ladakh, and it is a lifeline today of the Indian Army. Besides the Manali route, it is the lifeline of the Indian Army through Srinagar, Zojila, onto Leh. The last bit, 1 minute, if I may sum up and tell you, my fellow panelists will explain to you lots and lots of things about the contribution of the Indian Army to the destiny of Jammu and Kashmir. But let me tell you, the 1947-48 achievements is something marvelous. It went down to 65, they set the course for 65, for 71, for 89, for 99. Each time Pakistan has attempted to perceive that the people of Jammu and Kashmir lies in their favor, they have always failed. It is this particular narrative which needs to be brought to the world, to the attention of the world. And the more India does it through events such as this, the more we will achieve our final success. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, General. Thank you very much. And I must say that, you know, two, three aspects which you have said today are so crucial for our younger generation to know, to do away from that distorted narrative which had been given to the Indian younger generation that the tribal suddenly, jumped over from some place and attacked Kashmir. And the way you have narrated the entire planning behind it and how that whole Operation Gulmarg and all was done with is an eye-opener. And I must say that coming this from a journal, and yesterday when we had Professor Raghavendra Tawar, presenting those facts from the local records of deputy commissioners and schools and colleges and how preparations were being done there, I believe that the combined aspects of these two historical narratives brings out a kind of totally alternative history in relation to the history of this whole struggle which was waged against India in 1947. And this also qualifies with this aspect that why Jinnah sitting at Abbottabad, when Auchinleck told him, now this is no more possible and all, then was agreeable to this aspect, that immediately then stopped the fighting because they had Baramulla, they had Uri, and they had all other aspects. Those they thought that they will still be victorious, to which the Indian government didn't agree and fought back the Indian army in that aspects and all. And one more very crucial thing you have said in this is, which is very crucial in the contemporary times also, that this whole myth which Pakistan has developed, that the people of Jammu and Kashmir will stand with Pakistan, that has fallen to ground, always. Whether it was 47, whether it was 65, whether it was 71, and whether it is now, except a few exceptions, and those are being isolated now, those separatists and whosoever go pick up a gun and all that. But the younger generation, as we heard yesterday, this young advocate Faisal also speaking about what the younger generation feels about the relations about the country and about the motherland, that is extraordinary. And I believe these narratives will go on. And now we look forward, once again, thank you, General. We look forward to General Pannu. And we are also looking at, sir, to your things, not only just 47, but since you are an expert, I was going through your CV when I narrated it, with your expertise in the cyber area and also, so you can also throw some light towards this whole cyber aspect today, that the new dimension which the war is taking now, from 303 to machine guns and now to the cyberspace war and cyber war in that regard, its relevance also because I see more than 100 youngsters sitting here, in this COVID atmosphere and listening to you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, for inviting me over and also very nicely introducing me to the audience. I've had the privilege of serving very close and under General Atta Hassan and also, with General Gurmeet when he was British Indian Army had to be given to Pakistan. And therefore, regiments like Punjab Regiment, Sikh Regiment also went through a partition. We had a company or two companies of Muslims or even mixed lot had to be separated out. So there was a big confusion even among the rank and file of the army that we all fought together during Second World War. We were all trained together as one entity. How is it that different people of different religion have to go to another state because somebody else has decided it for you? And why was Pakistan created in a manner that it got created? Of course, largely it is being told that Muhammad Ali Jinnah wanted this, the Muslim League wanted it, but I think there was huge amount of British interest in carving out a state which they could control more easily because they had vested interest from the geostrategic significance. They, giving independence to India, continued to control this belt or this geographical region called Pakistan, and British continued to rule Pakistan for as long as till 70s. The constitution of Pakistan initially, came up in 61, but later on it was never fructified. Ultimately, the constitution came up in 1973. What was happening in Pakistan 1947 to 1960s and 73? Because the British were so deeply ingrained into keeping the Russians away. Now, when you go back to 1947, a strange phenomena that Raja Hari Singh, on a given day, because of this turmoil, decides that he wants to join India. But the British are looking away. Many people say that the Kabylis were picked up from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and those Kabylis, of course, are not Kashmiris. 20,000 raiders were created, and they said, on the basis of religion, you go and capture this area called Kashmir, and go and loot and plunder, irrespective of what the religion was. Of course, they were given very clear orders that, go and kill the Sikhs, you behead them, go and burn the houses of Muslims, and go and loot the Hindus. And they were out ready to plunder this area, not to capture this area, with the aim that Pakistan Army, after these Kabylis would have given a foothold to them in a manner that they would look like freedom fighters, and civilians, 20,000 people with arms of all kinds. In fact, I think the Punjab police of Pakistan transferred huge amount of automatic weapons or rifles of whatever vintage was available at that time to be given to the raiders to come and start doing a quasi-military operation in this area. As a result, the kind of loot and plunder that started, then the J&K militia, which had about 9,000 troops, which were not only defending the valley alone, but also had the responsibility of larger areas of Tyakshi, Turtuk, Kargil, the Kashmir Valley, and Rajouri, Poonch sectors. At a given point, when you talk about raid on Kashmir, of course, General Atta Hassan has very, very eloquently explained, how the raid started. But at the beginning of it, closer to Muzaffarabad, there is a militia battalion which had some Muslim troops and some Dogra troops, of course, very well motivated and ingrained. I think there was some element in the Muslims that was indoctrinated beforehand that they put themselves on a guard duty. Now, how much is truth? Because history is who writes it and how it is understood. I'm told that the Muslim guard got hold of the Dogras and massacred them at night. So there were no eyes and ears were left in Dumail and Muzaffarabad area, and they plundered Muzaffarabad at will because there was nobody to stop them. Similarly, they did the similar thing in Mirpur. They continued to move and crossed into Uri, Baramulla, and as General Atta Hassan has very eloquently explained, that the kind of loot and plunder which was on, I think their eye was on women and gold, and of course rest everything can be written off. You only do whatever you want, so the actual value objective was women and gold, that you get hold of them, transport them back to your bases, and rest you burn or kill, loot or plunder, whatever you want to do. But once the letter of accession is signed, that entitled the Indian Army to land in Srinagar, and the Srinagar airfield was at that time fortunately not raided yet by the Kabylis. That airfield was on that day available for the Indian troops to land the Dakotas there. If the letter of accession was not signed, if the decision to send the military was delayed even by a day or two, the airfield at Srinagar would have been captured by the Kabylis and they would not have been any place, because to have a land route open, it would have taken days and weeks for the Indian army to reach there. I think one of the biggest things was the timing. Once the Indian army reached there, they secured the airfield. Once the airfield is secured, the first Sikh, of course, one of the most decorated regiments of the Indian army now, as we see even today, is the one given this task. And of course, Colonel Rai, the story, General Lata Hassan has very, very clearly spoken. They started pushing the Kabylis back because they had just left Baramulla and they were headed towards Srinagar, and they met en route. And that is precisely where Brigadier Rajinder Singh of J&K militia was fighting but withdrawing. And that is where he actually got shot and he killed at Mohra. That is when the first Sikhs started pushing them back, and of course then a brigade size force, 2 brigade size force kept building up in this area. Now the issue is that what is different in J&K as compared to the rest of the country. I think what was different here is that the Raja signed a standstill agreement, and standstill agreement was more or less respected by the Indian state. But the Pakistanis initially did not react to it, but they responded to it by attacking. If the Pakistan establishment had recognized the standstill agreement and had not responded and respected it, the state would have been very different of Jammu and Kashmir today. It would have got all that it ever wanted from a standstill agreement. It would have gone into a separate process of stability. It would have enjoyed a status which is of a very different kind. The standstill agreement not having been responded to in a positive manner, but they reacted with force. It means Pakistan actually held the gun against the standstill agreement, which forced the Maharaja to sign the letter of accession in favor of India. And once the Indian troops were invited, they were not invited only for the defense of Jammu and Kashmir, but they were also invited to save the people of Jammu and Kashmir, because the raiders did not see any caste, creed, sex, religion. They were targeting every person with a strategy that render the Muslims homeless. And once they are homeless, they will be down to the knees and they will listen to us. As a result, the Muslims were supposed to be kept live, the rest, everybody was supposed to be killed. The Hindus and the Sikhs, they were targeting the women and children as well and take them as live booty, either to negotiate or to use them as booty. As a result, when the Indian army reached there, they had 2 objectives in front of them. One was to reclaim the territory as the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, that is including Gilgit-Baltistan, Mirpur and Muzaffarabad, which today is POK and Gilgit-Baltistan area in general. So the first objective of the Indian army was and should have been executed till the time the objective was achieved, was to reclaim the entire territory which is depicted by the international border as it stands even today. The second part was that the Indian army cannot defend its territory unless it defends its people. So it was extremely important to defend the people of Jammu and Kashmir, who were becoming the targets of the raiders all across. So they went in and continued to push the raiders, who were now in more of a defensive mode. They kept protecting the civilians, they kept rehabilitating the civilians, they kept assuaging the aspirations of civilians. They continued to go into houses, villages, and give them soccer treatment, give them, psychological, comfort, and continue to push the raiders behind. But of course, there are 2 or 3 things which we can talk about. Were British mute spectators in the whole thing, or were they hand in glove? I think the jury is still out. Some people say, oh, they looked away. Some people say, oh, they did not approve. Well, if the commander-in-chief on both sides are the British, Why would they keep quiet? Why would they look away? Why they could not control? If after all the armies were working under the directions of the British from both sides, why they kept quiet about it? And even if they kept quiet or looked away, why was Major William Brown, who was supposed to be in Gilgit Scouts, he was told actually to hand over back to the Maharaja. He was given instructions that you hand over this area to the J&K militia. But he went and he revolted. It was like a coup. And later on he was rewarded by the British. So the design is very clear that whether it is Gilgit, Baltistan or parts of now which you call POK were a design by the British, got executed under the table through an understanding of strategy, allowed it to be executed to a point, and when, as General Atta Hasnain was saying, Peer Country and Lady Gali and Late Bali Gali, all this was captured. What was preventing the Indian Army to go ahead? Because when you stand very close to Peer Country, where, of course, you know, General Atta Hasnain and myself and even General Gurmeet, we've stood in that area for many, many times. And you find once you are sitting on top of Peer Country, now there is a ridge line which goes down, and if you just barely roll down, you will reach Muzaffarabad. Why would somebody come and say, no, the winters are out, the winters are there? Well, the Gurkhas were there. At that time, the Gurkhas are not afraid of this kind because they actually come from, that is a homeland. How could Gurkhas not survive at Peer Country? Then somebody comes out with another theory that, beyond that area there were no Kashmiris. And Sheikh Abdullah did not want that area, which was Pahadi and more Punjabi speaking, Gujars, and they were not Kashmiris. So he thought politically that would not suit him and all that. So, couple of things all put together, and then the UN resolution comes in, and then we say, let's do plebiscite, and we brought forces to a halt. Now the forces came to a halt with an understanding that the erstwhile Silk Route today, which is Sipek corridor, would not have come up if the British at that time had allowed the Indian Army to reclaim the whole area. Today everybody is crying China, the Chinese have built a Sipek corridor, now Gwadar is being supplied all this, now Pakistan is playing into the hands of the Chinese. This was because the British wanted to be there and their prime objective was Russia, and they prevented the Indian Army from reclaiming the territory. And that is where the problem lies. Second issue is, you talk to people of Kashmir. Of course, when you are sitting in Srinagar, I'm not saying that nobody knows what people of Kashmir want. But I'm only giving my perspective. Having born there and over a period of time, I'm talking about 99, what they felt in 2008. I think people of Kashmir have been very confused. When they talk about Azadi, and when they talk about autonomy, and when they speak in a manner of Article 370, what are they actually wanting? Do they want Azadi from political leadership, which has given them nothing? What has political leadership of Kashmir given people of Kashmir? Complete disconnect between the people and the political leadership. The people of Kashmir have always said, कि साहब ये तो political leadership है जो हमारा फायदा उठाते हैं. How much money actually provided by the Indian government to the state of Jammu and Kashmir went beyond the political usage? How much money was actually utilized for public welfare? I don't think so much. Ultimately what happened, then the funds started getting released to the Indian army to do Sadbhavna. If the political leadership was doing Sadbhavna, why would Indian army be doing so much of Sadbhavna to build schools, to run schools? Actually, we ran schools for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, today, if you realize, most of the people who are educated would have actually been product of Army Goodwill Schools of Kashmir. No government school would have educated them to a point that they could speak English and do mathematics. If the Army Goodwill Schools got created, it is not because Army wanted to indoctrinate them. I can say, and I think majority of the military officers say, there was no indoctrination or reverse indoctrination that had happened. It was only education which got provided to them. The role of the Indian Army has been to defend the people of Kashmir, to make sure that their culture is respected, to make sure that they are free to practice their religious practices, to make sure that the Pakistan does not run a successful propaganda and proxy war which actually comes from across the border. there are militant camps there. Why would LET, what has LET got to do with Kashmir? They are Murid ke, they are Punjabis. They go and attack Bombay, they go and attack the parliament, they go and attack anywhere. What is common between LET and Kashmiris? Second thing is, when you talk about political leadership and people of Kashmir, they looked at who? They looked at nobody and they looked at everybody. They looked at the militant because nobody could save them from militant. Then they looked at the army because once the militant has lived there for a week, now they become the potential target of the military. They went into a double speak there. When you talk about the upper ground workers actually got money which was a counterfeit currency. Counterfeit currency is the one, I think the flow of which was more than whatever was legitimately given by the Indian government to the leadership to be spent on the welfare of people. But they did not reach people. It is the counterfeit currency which started reaching the people through the upper ground workers who only created reception areas for the terrorists to come across from the line of actual control and which was hugely spent on separatism. No political leader ever took a firm stand against terrorism and separatism. They have always had a double speak. The political leaders have confused because for them to enjoy a special status of Kashmir was not to get special status for Kashmiris. It was to get a special status to themselves as political leaders so that they could stand prominently in India as special people. I'm not naming a political leader. I'm not naming a political party in Kashmir. All of them actually only looked after themselves and the political party. They were, I think, they used the terrorists, they used the separatists, they used the innocence, they used the poverty, they used every vulnerability of the Kashmiris to only serve their personal interests. At the end of it, how many Kashmiris have got eliminated and what have they actually done to them? Nothing they have done. They have only spoken. If you actually run any political leader's speech, you don't know whether they are actually saying ki Pakistan ke saath jao. You don't know whether they are saying Hindustan ke saath jao. You don't know whether they are saying hame independent kar do. They're saying all this in one go and put some shero shairi in it, and people in Kashmir have no clue what anybody wants. As a result, the Pakistan, through their understanding of religion, has become, Pakistan became synonymous to religion. And religion became synonymous to Jannat. And Pakistan continued to promise Jannat to people of Kashmir that if you join militancy or join Pakistan, we will give you Jannat. In October 2008, when the command post was open for trade, and when the bus service started between Srinagar to Muzaffarabad, and I used to meet these people on the command post, and the so-called Jannat, the bubble of belief was burst. Because when the Indian side Kashmiri went to the POK, they said, "Saab, ye to POK nahi hai, to Punjab occupied Kashmir hai. और ये आजाद कश्मीर नहीं है, ये तो आर्मी पाकिस्तान आर्मी ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर है। आपने तो सेब और अखरोट बेचने थे उधर। Have you been able to sell सेब और अखरोट to Muzaffarabad? No, they did not have the buying capacity. People went to meet their relations there across. They did not get a warm welcome because they were in no condition to look after them. I have seen number of Kashmiris who went to Muzaffarabad, they cut short their visit and they came back because their relations on the other side could not look after them. They were actually so unhappy that they came back. He says, "Saab, अखरोट तो हम और सेब उधर बेचने जा रहे थे, लेकिन our buying power is more. उनके सेब अभी हम खरीदते हैं." In fact, if you see the trade imbalance, it was supposed to be on barter system. But what happened was, purchase power in the Kashmir Valley was much higher than what it was in Muzaffarabad. As a result, what the Pakistanis started selling in India was Chinese goods. You know, वहाँ पे अभी क्या आ रहा है, वहाँ से आपका ये लहसुन आ रहा है, ये लहसुन तो चाइनीज लहसुन आ रहा है, तो पाकिस्तान का क्या ट्रेड आ रहा है वहाँ पे? Pakistan did not have enough goods. They started importing goods to be sold to Kashmir. But whatever Kashmiri product was to be sold, you realize that the purchase power not being there, they landed up selling more product in India and less there. It is the transactional part of passengers moving up and down brought in huge amount of perception. Then you say that, look, I don't think दिखाया, वो जन्नत उधर है नहीं है. Lot of people thought कि उधर जाएंगे तो जन्नत मिलेगा. As a result, I find the Indian Army has protected the people of Kashmir and they have protected the line of actual control. But they should have actually defended the international border. I think over a period of time, it is up to the Indian establishment whether you want Pakistan or you want the Punjab occupied Kashmir of Pakistan as part of yours. I think we have to take a decision. But I think Kashmiri understands heart to heart. उसका दिल कुछ और बोलता है, जुबान कुछ और बोलती है. I think this is a dichotomy which the leadership has created for them. If the military and political objective are same, Kashmir will become strong and part of India. But if the military and the political objectives are at variance, which have been, they say AFSPA के अंदर बहुत power है. But I have seen that the number of FIRs, every operation there were FIRs and FIRs and FIRs by the J&K police, dictated by the political establishment. How is this that kind of a dichotomy that you are killing terrorists and the J&K police is actually ready with the FIR on the Indian army? What kind of a tamasha is going on? So as a result, एक हिंदुस्तान है. It is one India policy where only one rule, one constitution and one rule of law and one aim of defending the nation has to be executed, and that's it. And the political establishment, the military establishment and the entire Indian establishment would be one. Thank you very much, Jai Hind.
Thank you, General Punnu. In fact, your enlightening thought, I think, is very, very seriously be to taken by the younger generation sitting here, because you have made some very pertinent points. And the first point, I think, which should go home in Jammu and Kashmir is that when the Indian forces landed here in Srinagar, they had not come to defend the Hindu Raja. They had not come here to defend the Hindus and Sikhs, but they had come to defend Kashmir, the motherland, and every Kashmiri, whether who was a Muslim, who was a Sikh, or who was a Hindu. That is a big message which the younger generation must understand. Because of certain distortions and all, and propaganda, this whole thing had been eroded as if the Indian forces, why the Indian forces had landed up here. Secondly, you have very aptly proved, and I have been said about the last speaker also, the whole thing, that this British collaboration, what the British have done in this whole regard, collaborating with the Pakistanis and all. And in fact, the war with India, as you said, had started in July 47 only, and I'll say no. The war had started on this issue of Kashmir from 16th August, direct action day itself, when it was clear that India and Pakistan are going to be made. And what Jinnah was claiming as Pakistan areas during that period, right from Hyderabad to Bengal, to Bhopal, to parts of UP and whole of Kashmir and Junagadh and all these things. So the battle had started from there. There the preparations had started, and I think you have given me an idea today for further research. I'll have to do a paper on the misgifts of our first Governor General of India to India. That we made him the first Governor General of India, and what gifts he gave to us in terms of the whole policy of Kashmir by telling the Maharaja not to accede to India, and when the accession is done, saying that this is purely temporary, subject to plebiscite and all, and then stopping our forces and putting pressure on India that Valley should be given to Pakistan and all that. It opens a new dimension altogether for research and to prove these aspects related to that. Thank you very much. I think we'll have a tea break now, short tea break. And sir, please, Raghvendra ji, I must compliment him, and I must request him that all these things should be published in a book form also, the proceedings of this. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, sir. Because after that, last we'll then have the question answer sessions after the observations and tea break and the other two speakers. We have the question answer session for that. Please, sir. No, I don't think. Sir, why don't you come here? I think this will go. Come on the stage, sir.
Can the speakers hear now? Can the speakers hear me?
Take the camera there.
यार तुम लोग ऐसा है ना, वहां बैठ के बस वही करा करो जो कर रहे थे अभी। हाँ, बहुत अच्छा कर रहे हैं। अब मैं ये कहना चाह रहा था, दो चार चीजें मुझे अभी याद आई तो मैंने सोचा कि उसको आपके साथ शेयर कर लूं। एक तो मुझे याद आता है कर्नल एएसपी शाह का के कारनामे याद आते हैं। एएसपी शाह जो थे वो इस्कंदर मिर्जा के साथ नॉर्थ वेस्ट फ्रंटियर प्रोविंस में बहुत सक्रिय थे। ही वॉज वेरी वेरी एक्टिव। एंड खान साहब जो उस समय चीफ मिनिस्टर हुआ करते थे नॉर्थ वेस्ट फ्रंटियर प्रोविंस के, Kashmir is